Monopolies do not exist everywhere and every time because markets are getting competitive day by day. You become the only person who is going to supply the goods in the market. You start commanding a dominant position in the market. You will try to act as if you are the most competitive person in the market. You will try to minimize the costs and you will try to maximize the profit. Good morning and welcome to the first session in Unit 3, Business Decision Theory, where we are going to speak about the market structure. What is a market structure all about? Now, the first thing what we need to know about a market is that is a place where the buyers and sellers meet. They meet for a purpose because of exchange of goods and services. So this market has got a definitive structure altogether. It has structures like the monopoly-based market, the oligopoly-based market, the monopolistics or the duopoly market. So market has got a definitive term, the way how it functions. Market is not the one that we simply think about in terms of coming in, exchanging goods for a price and just going away. But market is one which has got an ideology, a picture that we need to think about. So one which I would like to talk about today is the monopoly market, starting with the market structure. The monopoly is an economic market structure where specific person or enterprise is the only supplier of good. The moment you become the only player in the market, you become the only person who is going to supply the goods in the market, you start commanding a dominant position in the market. You don't want to give up to anybody else. You are going to restrict the entry of people. You are going to believe that there is only one price and the price is what I set. So which means to say that a monopoly is basically one where you don't see any competition at all. So this is one kind of a non-competitive market. Why? Because there's only one seller and many buyers. Whatever the seller says, whatever price the seller goes on, the buyers have to go with it. That is exactly what we talk about in terms of this particular market. The other thing is that the monopoly market is characterized by a profit maximizer, price maker, high barriers to entry, single seller and discrimination. We're going to talk about these words in detail. Why? Because when I use this word called as profit maximization or a maximizer, it means to say that as a person, as a monopolist, my ideology is very simple. I just want to dominate the market as far as possible. I don't want to give up the market to anybody. I believe that this market belongs to me. I believe that the market is completely owned by me. So which means to say that every single product which I am going to sell will get me the maximum profit. I'm not going to go back on that. Whatever might be the product in which I am dealing, I will fix the maximum price so that I get the maximum return. So what am I? I am a profit maximizer. I want the maximum profit. I am not going to go on a discount offer. I am not going to go on any kind of special offers. I want money and I will try to see that I sell the goods at the maximum price, followed by the price maker. And this is an exclusive privilege which I would like to talk about. Why? Because in the normal markets, when you go to any kind of markets today, you don't have the rights to set the price. If you are a businessman having a shop in one of the areas of wherever you are residing, you don't have the option of setting the price. Why? Because the market is so competitive that if you try to set a price, your competitor will break it away. But being a monopolist, you have this advantage. You have the power to set the price and make the people follow the price, which means you are a price maker. You tell the people that yes, 1 kg of rice is available at 100 rupees, people have to buy it. Why? Because there's no other rice seller in the market. That's the power of being a monopolist, because you are a price maker. You decide the price and you set the price. Now, on what boundaries, what margins, or what kind of philosophy on which you're going to set the price is not known. does not need to be known also, but then you become the price maker and you decide how much to be sold. The next thing is the high barriers to entry. Now, you are not going to allow people to come inside. You're just going to follow the rule of the jungle, which means the fittest survives. So what you are going to do here is that you're going to block people from coming inside the market. You don't want people to come inside. You don't want people to start opening up a situation or a scenario and say to this world that, yes, this is the market. Everybody is welcome. No, you are not going to do that. You are going to tell people very, very clearly that I am the only seller and the market will continue with me. I am not giving this option to anybody else. So that is a very, very, very big, powerful position. So you are going to block everybody out of the market. Single seller, so you are the only person who knows about the product and you are going to sell it. Price discrimination. You have the rights to change the price. Look at the privilege you are getting. You have the rights to change the price at your will and wish. So today it is 100 rupees, tomorrow it is 120, day after tomorrow it's 80, 75. You name it and we take it. So that's exactly what we are talking about in terms of this price maximization. So this is something really, really fantastic. This is not going to be the same thing. This is going to be even more challenging. So what do I mean by saying here is that the monopoly characteristics include profit maximizer, price maker, high barriers to entry, single seller, and price discrimination. So you are probably one person who knows the market so well that you don't want to give up on any options to anybody. You rather think that I have the rights to hold this entire activity and let me take it forward in that manner so that I will command the entire market. Now, the next thing is that sources of the monopoly power include economies of scale, capital requirements, technological superiority, no substitute goods, control of natural resources, the legal barriers, deliberate actions. Look at the entire chain of actions that we are talking about in a monopoly market. You are the person who has got no substitute. That means you become indispensable. Look at the entire power, entire structure that a monopoly is creating in a market. Indian Railways remained a monopoly, still remains a monopoly. A reason is that the Indian Railways has held to its position and the government never allowed the privatization of railways. Still the talks are on, but we have not seen a private railway in India. Though the aviation got privatized, but the railways never got privatized, which means to say that they have that scale of operation, they have the capital infusion, they have the line and length of operation, and they have all the technology that is inbuilt. You separately run a kingdom. So you have every single superiority in terms of technology, in terms of capital, in terms of operations, marketing, whatever might be the scenario, you rule it. The reason is that nobody is allowed or nobody is there to substitute you. There is no other option at all. Now, it becomes something like this. We talk about in economics complementary goods or substitute goods. There are two factors, but here there is no substitute at all. So now what happens for you here is that you try to claim all rights and ownership in the market. So what happens is that there are deliberate actions that are being taken up by the monopolist. He goes back and says that this is what I want to do. Yes, you will be allowed to do that. You are not going to be stopped by any of the barricades. You are not going to be questioned about why you are doing it. Now let's go back to the Indian Railways example. If tomorrow the railways decides that they want to come up with a bullet train, absolutely yes. People are going to welcome it. Nobody is going to question that. Why not another kind of a train? Why? Because there's no comparison. There is nobody else who's operating in that. So there's no benchmarking at all for you. So what happens here is that you have the power to deliberate and take the actions forward. The next thing is that there are few similarities between a monopoly and a competitive market. Yeah, what is that? The cost functions are same, both minimize cost and maximize profit. Shutdown decisions are same, both of them have assumed to have a perfectly competitive market here. What I try to mean to say here is that both of them will try to act as competitive. They are not exactly competitive. Please understand the definition and differentiation very, very clearly. As a monopolist, you will try to hold the price for a level so that your profit keeps on maximizing. You will try to act as if you are the most competitive person in the market. You will try to minimize the costs and you will try to maximize the profit. And at the same time, tomorrow if you shut down from the market, you have lost the market. Because you cannot again make an entry, somebody else would have captured the market. So when you look in comparison with a competitive market, yes, there are a very few similarities that comes into picture, but then a monopoly still holds the reins in terms of governing the market. Now the next thing that we are going to see here, differences between two market structure. The first thing we are going to look is the marginal revenue and price, product differentiation, number of competitors, barriers to entry, elasticity of demand, excess profit, and the factors of supply curve. Now, when you look into a monopolist, the one thing that comes to your mind is that the differences that we are going to talk about. Marginal revenue and price. For a monopolist, the marginal revenue is going to be the highest. He is going to generate a huge amount of revenue. And the most important thing is that then there is no competitors, but in a perfectly competitive market, there are competitors. That's exactly a very big difference that a monopoly has got when compared to that of the regular market. So what happens in the long run is that the excess profits, the profit maximization, the supply curve, every single thing is held back. You're not in a position to demand things. You're not in a position to go back and tell people that, okay, fine, hold it for some time. You're not going to go further. But then what is going to happen here is that the monopoly is going to say that I need the profit and I'm going to make the maximum profit. The profit is not going to be shared with anybody else in the market. So you are the only person who is going to run the market throughout. Followed by the most significant distinction is that monopoly has a downward sloping demand instead of perceived perfectly elastic curve of the perfect competitor. It's a downward sloping demand, which means there is a possibility, like a regular demand curve, as the price increases, the demand decreases story. Yes, there is a factor here. It has a downward declining sloping demand instead of a perceived perfectly, which means there will be a demand. No, that's not going to be possibility, because with the price reaction coming into picture, there might be changes. So what happens in a monopoly is that it follows the same law of demand. Moment the prices are being overshooted and the monopolist starts sensing that now the customers are not interested in buying, that is, it becomes too much beyond a certain level, then the customers will reject him, will eject him out of the market. They'll say that, no, this is not in our possible boundaries. So what does the monopoly typically tend to do is that try to keep the price at a particular level and play the market in such a way that he gets the maximum profit. But his understanding is that he always wants to keep the market in control without the competitors and keeping the demand intact so that the money keeps rolling inside. So this is going to be a perfectly, a market which is everybody is loving. But then monopolies do not exist everywhere and every time, because markets are getting competitive day by day. Now moving further, a monopoly is a specific type of economic market structure. Just look at the graph and let us try to understand. A monopoly exists when a specific person is the only supplier of goods. Now, if you look here, the graph tells you very clearly P being the price and Q being the quantity here. Now, what happens here is the factor is moment you increase the price, there is an economic profit loss. Moment you decrease the price, yes, there is an economic profit gained. So what happens? You need to understand with the increase in price factor, the demand will come down. With a decrease in price factor, the demand will again go up. So what will happen? The marginal revenue will start expanding. And here you see that the demand is equal to average revenue, which is equal to price. So the average revenue and the price are on the same lines. It is not going to change at all. Whatever is the price that is fixed by the monopolist is the average revenue, because there's no differentiation at all, because there's no competitor at all. There's no going to be averaging sum of events because of competitors coming into picture or multiple pricing available. What is the price fixed by the monopolist is the price that is equal to that of the average revenue. So this is where, if you look into the graph very, very clearly, the quantity will tend to increase moment the price is decreased. That is exactly where I always say that the monopoly will follow the sloping demand curve. So it's very, very important for all of us to understand at this juncture that this is what monopoly is all about. Monopoly can be recognized by certain characteristics that sets it aside from the market factors altogether. As I have told you, the profit maximizer, which is being spoken about in great length. Why? Because a monopoly always tries to maximize the profit. Due to the lack of competition of a firm can charge a set price above what is charged, he will try to see that he is maximizing his entire game. Now what happens here is that, let's go back to the example of railways. Since there is no substitute available for the Indian railways, even if they hike the price, people cannot do anything. Why? Because hundreds and thousands of people are dependent on railways as their local means of transport. So what happens here is that they have to go ahead with that. They cannot argue, they cannot bargain, they cannot go and find a substitute. So what does a monopoly typically tend to do is that he tries to find out those areas where he will be able to maximize his profit by commanding a premium price. Now that premium price is because he knows that there is a need, there is a necessity for his product, and people are ready to spend a few rupees extra even though I am trying to increase the price. So that profit maximizing attitude really makes a difference in the monopoly. Why? Because you know it that people cannot go for any other substitute, people cannot ask for anything else more. So that is why this factor comes into picture. Followed by the price maker. As I talk about, the monopoly decides the price of the good, which is very, very important. As I told you, the price set by determining the quantity in order to maximize the revenue. Now what happens is that for most of the industries in the world, you cannot predict the profit. You cannot predict the revenue. Why? Because you are in a market where there are hundreds and thousands of competitors. Now, for example, if you look into the field of IT, information technology, in India, there are several IT companies like the TCS, Infosys, HCL, Wipro, Cognizant. Probably you talk about Mindtree, you talk about all those big IT companies in India. All of these companies are competing against each other. So what will happen is that the deals or the strategic wins would be divided. Their revenue would always be on a divided length. You cannot say that the entire revenue of the IT space will belong to one company. But in the case of monopoly, what happens is that since he has the right to set the price, he also knows exactly how much will be the marginal revenue. In the case of an open competition, you cannot just set the price and ask the customer to follow it. Rather, the customer will try to find out which price is more competitive, more agreeable to him. And there he will try to decide his price. But here what happens, because the monopoly has the right to set the price, he goes ahead and says that, yes, this is the price and this is the marginal revenue that I can earn through. Followed by the high barriers to entry is a very, very important thing that we are talking about. Other sellers are unable to enter the monopoly. You are not able to come inside. Why? Because there are challenges. Suddenly, I will not be able to enter the China market and start up an electronic manufacturing firm. Why? Because the government might not allow me. There are a lot of legal restrictions. There are a lot of factors which will try to make me completely obsolete. So what is happening in a monopoly market is that because of the high barriers from pricing, from capital infusions, from the legal barriers, I am not able to enter the market. Though there might be players, there might be people who want to enter that and start dominating, but then it cannot. Now, if you currently look into the scenario, Zomato and Swiggy, when they join hands together, now they have become a monopoly when it comes to the food delivery business because there's nobody else in that sector. So now what it is happening is that if concept of monopoly continues with Zomato and Swiggy for a longer time, then automatically they will become the dominant players in the delivery business, in the logistics factors altogether, and that's where they might create barriers for the upcoming entrepreneurs in that area. That is exactly where a monopoly plays. The single seller, because he's the only person who is providing the goods or services, there is no further arguments at all in that line, and he continues to dominate for the next level. The most important thing is the price discrimination, because the monopoly firm has the option to change the price at any given point of time. The elasticity factor, the way at which he can command a premium in the market is entirely different. So he will be able to sell the quantity of goods required at a particular price that is determined by him. This is definitely a very, very big strategic advantage that we are talking about. So definitely I would like to say that this is something which is going to create a very big strategic advantage. Now, the sources of monopoly is economies of scale, capital requirements, which we are talking about, technological superiority, no substitute goods, as we have spoken about, control of natural resources, network externalities. What is network externalities all about is that you have the capacity to connect, and you have the power to make that as one single network. You have the factors of connecting and holding the market. Nobody else will be able to penetrate here. The legal barriers are very high, and the deliberate actions taken by you are also on the stringent side. So this makes the market go really up. So this is why I would say that monopoly has got a complete command when compared to the other kinds of market. Now, the other thing is that monopoly versus a competitive market, I have told you the cost functions and things are entirely different. So that's why they would try to minimize the cost structure. What happens here is that, as I've told you previously, they try to go ahead in a structure where they try to compete against each other with a minimum price control, and they then try to control the market. But what happens in reality is that for a monopoly, he cannot extend price beyond a certain limit. Moving further, however, the noticeable differences, as I've told you, always is about the minimization. Here, if you see here, the factor of elasticity of demand and everything, and the perceived market in terms of competitive nature also matters when we talk about it. With this, I come to the end of this particular session. I hope and believe that all the information shared through this particular slide is of a great information, great resource to you. In the upcoming sessions, we will be learning more about the market structure. Until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.